Good evening, everyone. Today we are learning methods of social psychology. Social psychological approach and its needs and aims. Why do people do the things they do? And why do they sometimes behave differently in groups? These questions are of interest not only to social psychologists but to teachers, public policy makers, healthcare administrators, or anyone who has ever watched a news story about a world event and wondered, why do people act that way? Because social psychology concerns the relationships among people, and as we can frequently find answers to questions about human behavior by using our own common sense or intuition, many people think that it is not necessary to study it empirically. Although we do learn about people by observing others. Therefore, social psychology is in fact partly common sense and not entirely common sense. Social psychologists believe that a true understanding of the causes of social behavior can only be obtained through a systematic scientific approach, and that is why they conduct scientific research and generalize the results of their research to larger population by publishing them. While common sense might tell us that opposites attract, psychologists can put such ideas to test using various research methods to determine if there is any real truth to such folk wisdom. Social psychologists believe that the study of social behavior should be empirical. That is, it should be based on the collection and systematic analysis of observable data. In order to empirically study social behavior, psychologists rely on a number of different scientific methods to conduct research on social psychology topics. These methods allow researchers to test hypotheses and theories and look for relationships between different variables. As a scientific discipline, social psychology embraces three operations mainly. They are careful collection of observation or data. The second is integration of these observation into hypotheses and theories. And next step is to the adequacy of these hypotheses and theories in terms of whether they can successfully predict future observations or not. Which type of research is best according to you? Now, this depends largely on the subject the researcher is exploring, the resources available, and the theory or hypothesis being investigated further. Now, we are learning the methods, that is, in formulating the investigation. Every scientific investigation begins with a question, isn't it? The question can be dictated by a practical problem or grow out of theoretical interest as well. Now, what is theoretical research and what is applied research? Pure theoretical work in social psychology is aimed at the building of a basic body of knowledge and facts about the social world. And applied research is meant to provide immediate solutions to immediate problems. So, whenever the problem is arising, you're providing solutions as and when the problem is arising. And in theoretical research, most conducted in laboratories using experiments. And researchers are based on natural field settings in case of applied research. And goal for both is same for what? Theoretical as well as applied research. That is building knowledge, a concern regarding the quality of life, and an interest in how knowledge of social psychology is ultimately utilized by people. And both researchers have relevance for each other. Theories are able to suggest new approaches and strategies for dealing with the problems of society as and when arise. And in applied research, results of even the most applied studies are invariably used not only for the immediate applications to the problem at hand, but also for their implication for theory. So, this was theoretical and applied research. Social psychological research varies by location, how we measure variables, and how we analyze the data we obtain. It can take place in the laboratory, that is a controlled situation, or in the field, that is everyday situation. Studies can use observational methods, that is by simply observing and recording people in social situations. Surveys, that is through questionnaires specifically designed to investigate particular issues which are administered to individuals, or a variety of other techniques to explore the relationships between variables. Social psychologists use both quantitative methods, that is, using statistics to analyze numerical data, as well as qualitative methods. For example, looking for themes in narrative responses given by the participants. No matter which method or procedure a social psychologist is applying, it usually begins with observing the world around us and the creation of an interesting question. So the first step is always it starts with a question. If there is no question, you would never find an answer. You would not have the urge, for an answer if you do not have any question. The next step involves generating a specific testable prediction or hypothesis. Next, scientists must operationalize the variables they are studying. This means they must figure out a way to define and measure abstract concepts. Creating specific operational definitions allows scientists to precisely manipulate and measure the variables, in other words, to collect the data required. Moving on to methods of data collection. Now, what is method of data collection? A number of data collection and data analysis methods are available to us, which are widely used by social scientists. Regardless of which method is used, it is important to evaluate the research hypothesis in light of the results, either accepting or rejecting the original hypothesis. Social psychologists use statistics and probability testing to judge their results, which define a significant finding as less than 5% likely to be due to chance. Replications are important. Why? To ensure that the result is valid and not due to chance or some feature of a particular sample. Now we are moving on to different kinds of methods. So we are going to learn observational method and its types, advantages, disadvantages, correlational method, experimental method and its types, experimental designs and its types in today's class. So what is observational method? I'm sure everyone must have heard this and have studied in earlier classes. It is a type of descriptive research. This involves watching people and describing their behavior. Observational method is used only to get a picture of what is happening to a given set of people at a given time and how they are responding to the social situation. An example would be unobtrusively observe children on a playground with a video camera on, perhaps, and record the number of types of aggressive action displayed by the children. In observational research, participants may or may not be aware of the researcher's presence. The researchers do not try to control variable or ask participants to respond to direct questions. Instead, the participants are simply observed without disturbing or influencing or altering the natural setting. Unlike correlational and experimental research, which use quantitative data, observational studies tend to use qualitative data. So where and all these observation takes place? I think in the classroom also observation takes place. The teacher is always observing the students. And the students might think they are not being observed even during exams or otherwise, but they're always under observation. That 360 camera, a live camera, that is the teacher is always present. She's always observing. Let's learn the types of observational procedures. Control observation is the first one, that is usually a formal and structured observation, that is controlled observation. They are likely to be carried out in psychological laboratory. The researcher decides where the observation will take place. That is, the place is decided and at what time it will take place, with which participants, who are the participants involved, in what circumstances, and use a standardized procedure. So the experimenter is always like, he's aware of it. He's decided who are going to participate, what time it will take place, what is the location, and participants are randomly allocated to each independent variable group there. The second type of observation is naturalistic observation. So the first one was controlled observation, that was in a formal setting, that is laboratory. The second is naturalistic observation, that is informal. It is natural, right? So it is informal and unstructured observation. It involves studying the spontaneous behavior of participants in natural surroundings. And the researcher simply records what they see in whatever way they can. The third type is participant observation. What does that mean now? Which means the activities of a group in which an observer himself participates and note the situation. He will not be part of the activity, but he is definitely involved in the group and he is observing there. The fourth type is non-participant observation. It has a lack of participation of the observer in his group activities. He either watches the phenomena from a distance or participates in the group but never in its activities. He only sits in the group but does not show interest in the process. So we learned four types of observation, that is controlled observation, that is under laboratory. The second is naturalistic. The third is participant observation. The fourth is non-participant observation. Now moving on to its advantages and disadvantages. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of observation? So its major advantage is that it allows behavior to be seen and studied in its natural setting. So the person who is being observed is not aware of it, apart from the laboratory setting. People from outside or those already working in a setting can be trained to use it. Generally, day-to-day activities in a given setting are fairly routine, which can go unnoticed by the observer. And another one disadvantage is that events being observed are subject to bias due to the feelings of the people involved as well as of the observers. Another potential pitfall is that the actual behavior and responses of others may get influenced by the presence of the observer, thus defeating the very purpose of observation. So if the participant is aware that he is being observed, what happens? He is likely to change his behavior. And again, disadvantage could be that it is very time consuming. It needs a lot of days, continuous days of observation for the observer to observe the situation. And observations tend to be more costly and difficult to implement than naturalistic observations. The data gives only a description of the events that are occurring. They do not tell us anything about the relationship between different variables. So these were the advantages and disadvantages of observation method. Now moving on to correlational method. What is correlational method? Correlational method examines the statistical association between two naturally occurring variables. For example, one could correlate the amount of violent television children watch at home with the number of violent incidents that children participate in at school. Note that this study would not prove that violent TV causes aggression in children. This is not going to prove. Correlational studies are a type of research often used in social psychology as a preliminary way to gather information about a topic or in situations where performing an experiment is not possible. And correlations vary in direction. How? A positive correlation indicates that the scores on the two variables move in the same direction as the scores rise or fall for one variable. They also rise or fall for the other variable. It is indicated by positive sign, that is plus sign. A negative correlation indicates that the scores move in opposite direction. An increase in the score of one variable is accompanied by a decrease in score of the other, and it is indicated by negative sign, that is minus sign. That is correlation vary in direction when it comes to direction. So sometimes both could be positive, if this is increasing, the other is also increasing. Correlation also vary in strength. How does it vary in strength now? The closer the number is to +1 or -1, the stronger the correlation. So you say, right, whenever you get the answer, it is positively correlated, it is negatively correlated. And if it is closer to 1, that is 0.85, 0.7, 0.9, then it has a stronger correlation between both the variables are correlated. The closer the relationship is to 0, the weaker the correlation, right? We say it is there is zero correlation. Sometimes the two variables are completely unrelated, this would be called no correlation. Sometimes there is no correlation at all between the variables. When two things go together, it is very tempting to conclude that one is causing the other. Correlations only indicate a relationship, not whether one thing causes the other. Correlational research therefore allows us to predict, but it cannot tell us whether changing one variable will cause changes in another. It is even possible that some third, unmeasured and previously unconsidered variable is causing both variables to increase or decrease simultaneously. Did you understand correlational method? Or would someone like to explain?
Understood. Any questions,
Okay.
anybody? All clear, then we'll
Okay,
proceed.
moving on to its advantages. What are the advantages of correlational method? Correlational studies are often easier to conduct than experiments and can be used when conducting a controlled experiment is possible. And correlational research allows researchers to collect larger amount of data than experiments. Because correlational research usually takes place outside the lab, not in the laboratory. The results tend to be more applicable to everyday lives. They are general, basically. Correlational research opens up avenues for further research for other scholars as well. When researchers begin investigating a phenomena or relationship for the first time, correlational research provides a good starting position for them. It allows researchers to determine the strength and direction of a relationship so that later studies can narrow the findings down and, if possible, determine causation experimentally. And let us look at the demerits now. Correlational research only uncovers a relationship. It only uncovers. It cannot provide a conclusive reason as to why there's a relationship, right? It only says there's a positive correlation, there's a negative correlation. It is strongly correlated, positively correlated or strongly negatively correlated. But why? We don't know the reason because it doesn't have any scope for the reason. Interpretation of result is difficult here. Direction of causality is uncertain. A correlative finding doesn't reveal which variable influences the other. Let's see how. For example, finding that wealth correlates highly with education doesn't explain whether having wealth leads to more education or whether education leads to more wealth, isn't it? So these were the demerits. Any doubts so far? So we learned observational method and correlational method. Now moving on to experimental method. Any doubt?
No.
Okay. Experimental method. What is experimental method? It is widely used by the psychologists. Experiments are generally conducted to establish cause-effect relationship between two sets of events or variables in a controlled setting. It is a carefully regulated procedure in which changes are made in one factor and its effect is studied on other factor while keeping other related factors constant. In the experiment, cause is the event being changed or manipulated. Effect is the behavior that changes because of the manipulation. Now, moving on Further, let us learn what is variable in detail and types of variables, because that will help us in understanding the concept. You read earlier that in the experimental method, a researcher attempts to establish causal relationship between two variables. What is variable now? Any stimulus or event which varies, that is, it takes on different values or changes, can be measured as a variable. So something that changes its nature is variable. An object by itself is not variable, but its attributes are. For example, the pen that you use for writing is not a variable, but there are varieties of pens available in different sizes, shapes, and color. Those are variables. All of these are variables. The room in which you are sitting is not a variable, but its size is, as there are rooms of different sizes as well. The height of the individuals between 5 to 6 or anything is another variable example. Similarly, people of different races have different colors. Young people have started dyeing their hair in different colors. Thus, color of hair becomes a variable. Intelligence is a variable. There are people with varying levels of intelligence, high, moderate, low. Thus, the variation can be in the quality or quantity of objects or events. So that was variable and its example. And variables are of many types again. We will, however, focus on independent and dependent variables. What is independent and dependent variable? Independent variable is that variable which is manipulated. Listen very carefully. Independent variable is that variable which is manipulated or altered, or its strength varied by the researcher in the experiment. It is the effect of this change in the variable which the researcher wants to observe or note in the study. So this was independent variable. The variable on which the effect of independent variable is observed is called dependent variable. Dependent variable represents the phenomenon the researcher desires to explain. It is affected that change in the dependent variable will ensure from changes in the independent variable. The frequency of reporting of smoke, again, yes, that is some example. So that was dependent variable. One must remember that independent and dependent variables are interdependent. They are not independent of each other. Neither of them can be defined without the other. Also, independent variable chosen by the researcher is not only variable that influences the dependent variable. Any behavioral event contains many variables. It also takes place within a context or a situation. Independent and dependent variables are chosen because of the researcher's theoretical interest as well. However, there are many other relevant or extraneous variables that influence the dependent variable. So it is not just the independent variable that is influencing the dependent variable. There could be some extraneous variables as well. But the researchers may not be interested in examining their effects. These extraneous variables need to be controlled in an experiment so that a researcher is able to pinpoint the cause and effect relationship between independent and dependent variables. So did you understand what variable and its types are? Okay, moving on further. Before that, I would like to quote an example. Listen very carefully because the next explanation is based on the example. Two American psychologists, Bibb Lattin and John Daly, conducted a study in 1970. In order to participate in this study, the students of Columbia University arrived individually at a laboratory. They were given the impression that they would be interviewed on a certain topic. For each student was sent to a waiting room to complete a preliminary questionnaire. Some of them found two other people already seated in the room, while others sat down alone. Soon after the students had started working on the questionnaire, smoke began filling the room through a wall vent. The smoke could hardly be ignored. Within 4 minutes, the room contained enough smoke to interfere with vision and breathing. Latin and Dale were primarily interested in knowing how frequently students simply got up and left the room to report the emergency. And what happened next? Most, that is 75% of the students who were waiting alone, reported the smoke, who were sitting alone, not with the previously seated people. But those reporting in groups were far less. Why? Groups consisting of 3 naive students reported it only 38% of the time. When the students waited with 2 other confederates who were instructed beforehand by the researchers to do nothing, only 10% students reported smoke. So people who were seated alone, that is 75% of the students, they reported. Now moving on to further about experimental and control groups. What is experimental and control groups here? Experiments generally involve one or more experimental groups and one or more control groups. An experimental group is a group in which members of the group are exposed to independent variable manipulation. And we learned what is independent variable, right? And the control group is a comparison group that is treated in every way like the experimental group, except that the manipulated variable is absent in it. So in under control group, there is no manipulation. In independent variable, there is manipulation. All relevant variables in experimental studies that might influence the dependent variable need to be controlled. These are of 3 major types, that is organismic variables such as anxiety, intelligence, personality, etc. Situation or environmental variables operating at the time of conducting the experiment such as noise, temperature, humidity, and sequential variables. The sequence related variables assume significance when the participants in the experiments are required to be tested in several conditions. Exposure to many conditions may result in experimental fatigue or tiredness, or practice effects, which may influence the results of the study and make the interpretation of the findings difficult. In order to control relevant variables, experimenters use several control techniques. Some illustrations are given below. Since the goal of an experiment is to minimize extraneous variables, that is the goal. The best way to handle this problem is to eliminate them from the experimental setting itself. For example, the experiment may be conducted in a soundproof and air-conditioned room to eliminate the effect of noise and temperature. So these are examples of extraneous variable. What? Noise and temperature. That is interfering. Elimination is not always possible. What do you do in such situation? Effort should be made to hold them constant so that their effect remains the same throughout the experiment. For controlling organismic example, fear, motivation, and background variables such as rural, urban, caste, socio-economic status, matching is also good. So you mix. In this procedure, the relevant variables in the two groups are equated or held constant by taking matched pairs across conditions of the experiment. Counterbalancing technique is also used to minimize the sequence effect. How? Suppose there are 2 tasks to be given in an experiment. Rather than giving the 2 tasks in the same sequence, the experimenter may interchange the order of the task. Thus, half of the group may receive the task in the order of A and B, while the other again in B or A, or maybe it is A, B, B, A order. And random assignment of participants to different groups eliminates any potential systematic differences between the groups as well. Now let us see the pros and cons, that is the advantages and disadvantages of experimental method. What happens here? The strength of a well-designed experiment is that it can provide, relatively speaking, a convincing evidence of a cause-effect relationship between 2 or more variables. However, experiments are often conducted in a highly controlled laboratory situation. In this sense, they only simulate situations that exist in the outside world. They are frequently criticized for this reason. The experiments may produce results that do not generalize well or apply to real situations. In other words, they have low external validity. Another limitation of the laboratory experiment is that it is not always feasible to study a particular problem experimentally. How? For example, an experiment to study the effect of nutritional deficiency on intelligence level of children cannot be conducted, as it would be ethically wrong to starve anyone, right? You cannot conduct such experiments. The third problem is that it is difficult to know and control all the relevant variables. Next, moving on to field experiments and quasi experiments. What is field experiments and quasi experiments? Anyone would like to throw light? Or are you already sleeping? Okay. Field experiments and quasi experiments. So far, we learned controlled and uncontrolled, right? Now, field and quasi experiment. Now, what is it? When you hear this field, experiment name, if a researcher wants to have high generalizability or to conduct studies which are not possible in laboratory setting, he or she may go to the field or the natural setting where the particular phenomenon actually exists. In other words, they may conduct a field experiment if it is not possible in the laboratory. So that is field experiment. For example, a researcher may want to know which method would lead to better learning among students, lecture or demonstration method. For this, a researcher may prefer to conduct an experiment in the school rather than getting the teacher in the laboratory. The researcher may select two groups of participants, teach one group by demonstration method and another group by normal teaching method for some time. And they may compare their performance at the end of the learning session. In such type of experiments, the control over relevant variable is less than what we find in laboratory experiments, right? Also, it is more time consuming and expensive. Yes, it is. Because you have to wait for the teacher to teach the method, she has to be available. It is a lot of time consuming. And you need to have a lot of patience as well. Many variables cannot be manipulated in the laboratory setting. For example, if you want to study the effect of an earthquake on children who lost their parents, you cannot create this condition artificially in the laboratory, can you? No, right? In such situation, what happens? The researcher adopts the method of quasi, that is the Latin word meaning as if. Experimentation, quasi experimentation method. In such types of experiments, the independent variable is selected rather than varied or manipulated by the experimenter. For example, in the experimental group, we can have children who lost their parents in the earthquake, and in the control group, children who experienced the earthquake but did not lose their parents. Thus, a quasi-experiment attempts to manipulate an independent variable in a natural setting, using naturally occurring groups to form experimental and control groups. So we learned control group, experimental group, laboratory experiment, natural experiment so far. Any doubt? Let's learn more merits and demerits. It provides researchers with a high level of control. That is the merit. Due to the controlled environment of experimental research, better results are often achieved in this kind of method. The result of experiment research can be duplicated as well for further studies. And demerits. Results are highly subjective due to possibility of human error. Of course, it is possible. Experimental research can create artificial situations that do not always represent real life situations. These are artificial, right? This is not real life, so it is fake. It is time and money consuming process, a lot. Human responses in experimental research can be difficult to measure. It might not be feasible in some situations, like I gave you an example previously. There may be ethical or practical problems with variable control. Again, extraneous variables cannot always be controlled. by the experimenter. So these were the merits and demerits. Any doubts so far?
Good, Ritika.
Nah.
All good.
Okay, next moving on to experimental design. So far we learned three methods, that is observational method, correlational method, and experimental method. And under experimental method, we learned control group, experimental group, laboratory experiment, natural experiment, and quasi-experimental method as well we learned. So next, moving on to experimental designs. Now, what is experimental design now? There are many types of experimental designs used in social psychology now. Each design represents a more complete attempt to rule out the possibility that observed differences between conditions result from something other than the manipulation of independent variable. Under that, we have the one-shot case study. Now, what is one-shot case study? It is a single group studied only once. That is one-shot case study. A group is introduced to a treatment or condition and then observed for changes which are attributed to the treatment. So what happens? So there is one group, it is given treatment, and after the treatment is given, the group is observed for the results, pre and post treatment. There is nothing with these observations may be compared because there is no other group, right? So one has no way of knowing whether the event or manipulation had an effect because it's only one group. So that is one shot case study under experimental design. The next is a true experimental design. What is a true experimental design? In this type of design, participants are allocated randomly to one of the two groups. So there are two groups here. One group is exposed to the independent variable, that is experimental group, and the other is not, that is control group. So there is experimental group and control group, only two groups. Both groups are assessed on the independent variable and the comparison of the two groups on this measure. It indicates whether or not the independent variable had an effect. So here there are two groups, that is experimental method and control group. And it is assessed on independent variable, not dependent variable, and the effect is seen by comparing both the groups, that is experimental and control group. So for experimental group, the treatment is given. For control group, the treatment is not given. Imagine that you want to know if salt makes water boil faster. What would you do? You would want to heat one pan of water without salt and one pan of water with salt at the same temperature, right? So you will keep both the pans on either sides, one with salt, one without salt. Then you would compare how long it takes each pan of water to boil. In this experiment, the water without salt is your control group. What is control group? No treatment is given. That is without salt water. Water without salt. The control group is composed of participants who do not receive the experimental treatment at all. When conducting an experiment, these people are randomly selected to be in this group. They also closely resemble the participants who are in the experimental group or the individuals who receive the treatment. While the control group does not receive any treatment, it does play a critical role in the experimental process. This group serves as a benchmark, allowing researchers to compare the experimental group to the control group, right? Of course, you need someone to compare to, so it is playing a role in that way, to see what sort of impact do changes bring to the independent variable group. So in one pan, there is water added in the salt. The other pan, the salt is not added in the water. And I mean, you have two different things to compare with. Otherwise, there's no point in comparison if there's no salt in both the pans. Because participants have been randomly assigned to either the control group or the experimental group, it can be assumed that the groups are comparable. Any differences between the two groups are therefore the result of the manipulations of the independent variable. Like I told you, independent variable is the one that has given treatment. The experimenters carry out the exact same procedure with both groups, with the exception of the manipulation of the independent variable in the experimental group. That is, in the above example, you saw that both the things had the same procedure, that is heating the water. But the control group was not manipulated. That is, the salt was not added in the water. That was the only difference. Control groups are particularly important in social sciences such as psychology. This is because it is practically impossible to completely eliminate all the bias and outside influence that could alter the result of the experiment. But control groups can be used to focus on the variable you're trying to test. Failure to provide evidence of strong control group can cause a study to be considered invalid. So did you understand a true experimental design? Okay, moving on to factorial design. What is factorial design? A common design in social psychological experiment is the factorial experiment, in which two or more independent variables are manipulated. Now here, two or more independent variables are manipulated within the same study. See, previously we saw in experimental design that there is only one variable, there is only one group, right? So there is no comparison there. Again, treatment is given. So that was independent variable. The second was a true experimental design under which there were two groups, that is experimental as well as control, right? For experimental group, the treatment was given, that is independent variable. Now we are moving on to factorial design. What happens in factorial design? Here, there are two or more independent variables, not dependent. Independent variables which are manipulated within the same study. The main benefit of a factorial design is that it allows the researcher to examine the separate and combined effects of two or more independent variables. The main effect is the effect of one independent variable on the dependent variable. It ignores the effect of any other independent variables. In general, there is one main effect for each dependent variable. For example, let's say you're conducting a study to see the effect of gender, of adolescence and violence on TV on aggression. As there are two independent variables, that is gender and violence on TV, there are basically two main effects as well for that. The main effect of gender of adolescence on aggression is the first effect. The second is main effect of violence on TV on aggression. The two independent variables can also work together on the dependent variable as well. In that case, the effects are called interaction effects. A statistical interaction occurs when the effect of one independent variable on the dependent variable changes depending on the level of another independent variable. So there are two or more independent variables is what we discussed, right? In given example, it is equivalent to asking whether the effect of violence on TV changes depending on the gender of the adolescent. If the effect of violence on TV on aggression for male adolescents is different from the effect of violence on TV on aggression for adolescents, then there is an interaction. So this was factorial design, in which two or more independent variables are manipulated within the same study. So it is basically studying the violence on TV, whether it is whether it remains same for the adolescents or not, or based on the gender as well. Now moving on to the threats to the validity in experimental research. So what is validity? What is the meaning of validity? Validity means, does the test measure what it claims to measure? Due to the importance of validity of experimental research, we should be aware of what could comprise it. There are two main categories of validity that are concerned with threats to research, that is internal and external validity. What is internal validity? It refers to specifically to whether an experimental treatment or condition makes a difference or not. So if the treatment is given or not, I mean, if the treatment is given, is it of any use or not? and whether there is sufficient evidence to support the claim. That was internal validity. Now, external validity. It refers to the generalizability of the treatment, condition, or outcomes. That is external validity. The validity of an experiment may be threatened due to the following reasons. Let us see what are the reasons. First is confounding. What is confounding? A confounding variable is an extraneous variable that does indeed influence the dependent variable, right? We saw in the previous context that, what are extraneous variables? Now, while conducting a research in the laboratory or anywhere else, that noise, pollution, all these things, right? So that actually interferes, right, during experiment. A confounding variable systematically varies or influences the independent variable and also influences the dependent variable. Yes, it does. If in an experiment on memory and age, all the older participants are female and all the younger are male, then sex and age are confounded and the memory data cannot be properly interpreted. That was confounding. Next, social desirability. What is social desirability? It is used to describe the fact that participants are usually keen to be seen in a positive light and may therefore be reluctant to provide honest report of fears, anxieties, feelings of hostility or prejudice or any other quality which they think would be regarded negatively. Yes, that happens to most of us while taking any test, any exam, like 16P of personality and all of that. So sometimes, we do think, okay, should we, click this? What will the other person, whoever is seeing the result, think? But again, being honest is important. So, as per social desirability, a person tends to act because no one wants to be in a negative frame of others. The third is experimenter expectancy. It refers to the experimenter's own hypothesis of expectation about the outcome of the research. It increases the likelihood that the participants will behave in such a way as to confirm the hypothesis. So the experimenter who is conducting the experiment is already having some expectations regarding the hypothesis. Okay, this will be the outcome. That will be the outcome. So these were the validity of an experiment which threatens, the validity. That was confounding, social desirability, and experimental. And there are certain ways to minimize these effects. So there are ways how you can reduce these effects. Let us look at them one by one. Post-experimental inquiry. So that was the first one. What is post-experimental inquiry? The participant is carefully interviewed after participation in an experiment. So not during an experiment or not before, it is after the experiment is conducted. The purpose is to elicit from the participants that what he or she believed to be aim of the experiment and the extent to which this belief affected or his or her behavior in the experiment. So basically asking the experience of the participant. That is post-experimental inquiry. The second is unobtrusive measures. It is also called as non-reactive measure. So what is this? It measures that the participant is not aware of and which therefore cannot be influenced his or her behavior. That is, the participants do not know what is being measured and they will be unable to modify their behavior. So if you don't know that you are being observed or a test is being taken for you, then you're just going to be honest, right? You're not going to change your behavior if you're not aware if you're being observed. So this is what it is. That is a non-reactive measure. The third is cover story. What is cover story? A cover story is a false but supposedly plausible explanation of the purpose of an experiment. The intention is to limit the operation of demand characteristics. However, an unconvincing story can create more problems than it solves, raising doubts in the mind of the participant that otherwise may not have risen. Another strategy to reduce experimenter expectancy effect is to keep the experimenter blind to the hypothesis under test or at least blind to the condition to which a given participant has been allocated. So these were the ways to minimize the effects. Any doubts so far? Yes, no.
No doubts.
Okay, next moving on to ethnography. So this is another topic. So far we learned methods. Methods of what? In formulating the investigation. Methods of social psychology. So now we are moving on to ethnography. What is ethnography? It is art and science of describing a group or culture. The group could be small group or a larger group or classroom or our study group as well. So it is basically art and science of describing the group or the culture of the group. It studies the it is a qualitative approach that studies the cultural patterns and perspectives of participants in their natural setting. So this is ethnography. Now, moving on to characteristics of ethnography. The first is gathering data from the range of sources, that is through interviews. How do you gather the data? Through interviews, observations, conversations, and documents. Then studying behavior in everyday context rather than experimental condition. That is, the subject might have to live, within the group wherever he or she is conducting the study to understand better. Then using an unstructured approach to data gathering in the early stages so that key issues can emerge gradually through the analysis. The next is comprising an in-depth study of one or two situations, whatever he or she wishes to study. So these were the characteristics of ethnography. Any doubt here? No. Next, moving on to steps in ethnography method. So what are the steps here? Ethnographer starts with selection of a culture initially, then review of the literature pertaining to the culture and identification of variables. It is very similar to any kind of project, whatever you take in, any kind of research. The ethnographer then goes about gaining entrance, which in turn sets the stage for cultural immersion of the ethnographer in the culture. It is not unusual for ethnographers to live in the culture for months or even years, which means the ethnographer lives among the people, with the people to understand their culture from close. The next is the middle stages of the ethnographic method involve gaining informants, using them to gain yet more informants in a chaining process, and gathering data in the form of observational transcripts and interview recordings. So he also takes help of the people. That person takes help of somebody else. That person takes help of someone else to gather more and more data and for the in-depth study of the culture. The next is data analysis. That is the last thing. And theory development, theories. These emerge from culture immersion and theory articulation by members of the culture. So these were the steps in ethnography method. Starts with selection of culture, then he also lives among the people, to understand their culture. Again, he takes help of other people or the informants to gather more data. The last is data analysis and theory development and reports. Let us learn other methods in ethnography. The first is macro ethnography. What is macro ethnography? It is a study broadly defined culture such as the English or Mumbaikars or college students like Bengaloreans, This is macroethnography, studying a culture. The next is microethnography. It is a study a more narrowly defined cultural grouping such as the local government or members of Congress or student body at the IGNOU or the study group or Praharsh, like Praharsh is a group in itself. Next, emic perspectives. What is emic perspectives? It is the approach under which the viewpoints and responses of the in-group. What is in-group? In-group is nothing but own group or the members of the culture under study are noted. I'll repeat, what is emic perspective? It is the approach under which the viewpoints and responses of the in-group or the members of the culture under study are noted. The next is ethic perspective. So we learned emic, now we are learning ethic. Ethic perspective. It is the approach under which the viewpoint and responses of the outgroup, that is another group, not your own group, the other group, or the members who do not belong to the culture under study are noted. Their viewpoints highlight the phenomena being followed under a particular culture. The next is situational reduction. It refers to the view of ethnographers that social structures and social dynamics emerge from and may be reduced analytically to the accumulated effects of micro-situational interactions. Next is symbols. Always a focus of ethnographic research is symbols. They are any material artifact of a culture, such as art, the clothing, or even technology. You know, sometimes you suppose you say Pink City. What is Pink City? Jaipur is called Pink City. Udaipur is called, Blue City. So these are the symbols that you identify any culture or city or anything, So symbols are very important. The ethnographer strives to understand the cultural connotations associated with symbols. The next is cultural patterning. It is the observation of cultural patterns forming relationships involving two or more symbols. Ethnographic research is holistic, believing that symbols cannot be understood in isolation, but instead they are elements of a whole. And there are methods of cultural patternings. What are these? That is conceptual mapping by using the terms of members of the culture themselves to relate symbols across varied forms of behavior and in varied context. So even to remember this symbols, you have other things that you can relate, the other concepts. You have certain names or shortcuts. The next is focus on learning process. That is to understand how a culture transmit what it perceives to be important across generations, how the culture has transmitted, over the generations. That is focus on learning process. The third is focus on sanctioning processes. That is to understand which cultural element are formally, example, legally prescribed, and which are informally prescribed or proscribed, and of these which are enforced through sanction and which are unenforced. That is focus on sanctioning process, which is a legal or not legal religion or a culture or anything. The next is tacit knowledge. It is deeply embedded cultural belief which are assumed in a culture's way of perceiving the world, so much so that such knowledge is rarely or never discussed explicitly by members of the culture, but rather must be inferred by the ethnographer. The next is meta-analysis. What is meta-analysis? As a number of studies on a particular topics increase, researchers are confronted with a new problem. That is how to synthesize research findings to arrive at general conclusions. Meta-analysis is a statistical technique for combining the findings from independent studies into one report to create a single, more precise estimate of an effect. So you have all the findings now. Now you have to make a precise note or a report. In meta-analysis, researchers try to test for the consistency, that is homogeneity, of findings across studies. When results from different studies are found to be highly consistent, researchers can have much more findings in findings. When results of studies differ, meta-analysis technique direct researchers to look for other important factors why there is no match, why it is not correlated. Meta-analysis is an important tool for understanding the social psychological research and so for understanding social behavior and social cognition as well. That is it for today. You can stop recording.
Very good. Nice class too. Thank you. I knew most of the topics, so I didn't have any questions.
Can I stop the recording or anyone is?
You can stop
No, you
recording.
can stop the
Stop it,
recording.
yeah.